And so on March 29th, 2020, I posted this. And it got zero anythings. And it was interesting because at this point in my little social media experiment, I was getting a lot of comments on everything. Primarily because I think that I was the only person in my sphere, at least that was outwardly pushing against the narrative. Of my thousands of Facebook friends, I was the only one. I mean, I got a couple DMs from a couple people, thanking me, saying, thank you for, talking about the economy. Thank you for, bringing this stuff up. But it was only a couple people. So when I posted this and it got nothing, it was very enlightening. This is something that we all inherently know. The fact that the media lies to us all the time is a fact of life. And I know it sounds really harsh when you say the media is lying to you. Well, they are. We can sugarcoat it. And I've said previously, and this is my opinion, I don't think it's necessarily nefarious. Maybe sometimes it is. I think it can be explained by some very basic other human traits, and in this case, I still contend that the majority of the experts and the majority of the media, I contend that most of them actually believe that they were doing good. And they excused these kinds of lies. And they wouldn't call them lies. They would call them fudges or white lies or, framing, stuff like this. But they excuse this stuff because they think that they're doing good. Their theory had never been tried in history before ever. And for good reason. And it was recommended against in all of the, the playbooks around the world to never do this. And yet we were doing this. And everybody jumped on the lockdown train. And because they allowed themselves to be convinced by stupid people that this was the only way and that it had a chance of working, which is, again, nuts. If you even think it through past like one or two, it just falls apart immediately. But they push this stuff, they push this fear, I think in their minds for good reasons. And they thought that they were helping. Again, if you really believe that the only way to get through this is for as many people to stay home as possible for as long as possible, then you find yourself doing stuff like this. And this is for ratings and yes, blah, blah, blah. But I'm talking about the underlying psychology here. Because on a certain level, this reporter has to know that this isn't honest, right? That this is BS. So, play this through, right? He gets there with his cameraman and his cameraman's setting up the camera. And of course, they all know that they don't have to wear these hazmat suits, but they go and put the reporter in a hazmat suit and put him in front of the camera. And so what is going through their minds at this time? My guess, my bet, is that this guy, as he's putting on the hazmat suit, he's got a little bit of a religious tingle in his nethers because this guy probably thought he was helping. And that is a really scary thing. That is a very, very, very corrosive thing, because there's a saying about good intentions. I'll remember it one of these days. This is the same thing that happens with hurricanes, right? Like, look at this. This is a very famous one. This dude was, yelling into the camera saying he was going to die in this hurricane, and these kids are behind him just having a grand old time. Most people know this. Most people understand that this is happening, and yet they willfully ignore it. And when you bring it up, they ignore you bringing it up. And so it was really telling when this got essentially zero engagement. People just looked at this and said, zunk, zunk. If I don't see this, it doesn't matter. If I don't see this, it never happened. Interestingly, the population, sort of the normies that were going along with this whole disaster, with the best of intentions, of course, they are the normal people version of this, right? Because when you wrap yourself in the fear and you only promote and perpetuate these fear-based headlines that we went over in the last video, and we will again because they are never ending. They're doing the same thing that this guy's doing, which is pretending. And they don't think of it as pretending, they think of it as focusing. If you are in a position where you actually believe that hysteria and fear are a positive moving force to accomplish something that you need to be accomplished or you feel is the right path, then that you're wrong. When has that ever worked? You even have the very, very mainstream people doing this all the time. Here's the richest man on cable TV, and he's standing waist deep when his cameraman isn't anywhere near this. And look, again, this is framing the story. This is making it as interesting as possible. And the expectation, even for Andy Vanderbilt here, to come up with a story that gets better ratings, right? In his mind, in his producer's mind, and the cameraman's, everybody involved here firmly believes that it is better for everyone involved for him to go waist deep in this water and pretend like it's worse than it is. And I would argue that that is absolutely wrong. It's dishonest. Nothing good comes of dishonesty. Would CNN's little ratings on this segment have been lower had Anderson Cooper been standing up where the cameraman is and saying, look, it's a little deep back there, and so far, this is manageable, but we're keeping an eye on it. Like, they would have dipped a little bit. But the respect that you get from being honest like that is incalculable. And this has been on hyperdrive ever since the advent of 24/7 cable news. And I would also point out the advent of C-SPAN, which I used to be a huge fan of, but C-SPAN has really transformed our political scene into a circus. Back to this guy. Again, what was he thinking? He didn't think he was putting his cameraman at risk. His cameraman wasn't like, I'm going to take one for the team. I got to make sure I push the record button. No, they think of this as a theatrical production in a certain sense. You're a journalist. You're not a Broadway producer. The undercurrent of all this, again, is we have to puff up the fear, because if we don't, we're going to have a lot of free idiots going out there, rubbing against each other, super spreading, and destroying the world. You got to remember, in 1969, they literally went and got in a big group and rubbed against each other during a pandemic. It was called Woodstock, and they all died. Again, this unhelpful as can be. Congratulations, media. You're the virus.